If you aren't on track to achieving your poker goals right now, you likely have one of two problems: a planning problem or an execution problem. We'll dive into how to solve each of those very soon. But yesterday I jumped on a coaching call with my poker athletes, and one of the themes that came up was a lot of players felt like they weren't getting enough done. They weren't getting as much out of their days as they could. I'm sure a lot of you watching this video can relate to that feeling where you have a lot that you want to do each day, but you're struggling to consistently do that. As we started to go a little bit deeper into the challenges the players were facing, it became clear to me each of them had one of two problems, which we'll dive into very soon. But first of all, we had to get clear on what each player was trying to achieve each day. All right, you can relate to yourself. What are you trying to get done on a daily basis? There's infinite amount of things to learn, to study, to improve, and put your time and energy into. But it came down to four key things that almost all the players agreed were the most important on a daily basis. The first one was grinding consistently. They wanted consistent grinding hours on a daily and weekly basis, and most of the players had target hours for the week that they wanted to hit. The second thing they wanted to execute on was their studying. They wanted consistent studying, again, over the week, and most of them were aiming for around 1 hour per day of deep studying. The third thing was building a strong mindset. All right, these are my poker athletes, so they're always leveling up their mindset and their performance. I create a lot of coaching and training for them to be developing their mindset on a weekly basis. So they've got clear things to be working on each week. And the fourth thing was optimizing their health and their lifestyle. This includes sleep, diet, exercise, meditation habits, and everything around feeling their best at the tables. So I started to ask them, why aren't you able to be consistent with these four things? And the first group of players who were struggling had a planning problem. So let's break down what the planning problem is, and I'll give you 5 steps on how to get past it. So most players lack a structure to their days. They are quite disorganized, they don't plan their time, and as a result, they get distracted, they're disorganized, and they waste a lot of time. Now, if you want to be consistent in any area of your life, you need to develop a system that gets you reliable results. In terms of poker, that involves planning your time effectively. Now, think of an area of your life where you're very consistent. It could be with the gym, it could be a meditation habit, or it could be with your grinding. I would bet you that most likely you have a scheduled time where you do that activity. For myself, for example, I meditate every day, and it's always first thing. I wake up, have a glass of water, and I meditate. The gym, I'm very consistent with the gym. I go 4 or 5 times a week, and it's always between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. When I played poker, I used to do high volume, consistent with my grinding, and it was always in the same 10-hour window. All right, so think of yourself. I'm sure it's quite similar. The things that you're doing consistently, you do them at a somewhat scheduled time. All right. Now think of an activity that you lack consistency. This could be with your grinding. This could be with your studying. It could be with exercising, reading, or learning. There's a strong chance that you haven't protected your time for these activities in the same way. You leave them to chance. You do them as you feel like doing them, and you let your almost emotions or feeling in the moment dictate whether you'll do that activity. You'll study when you feel like studying. You'll go to the gym when you feel like going to the gym. You'll fit in some reading when you feel like fitting it in. If that sounds like you, and from my experience, this is most poker players, then you have a planning problem. So how do you solve the planning problem? First of all, you need to get more organized. I know some players don't like the thought of being organized and structuring their days. It feels quite rigid, and they quite like a loose, free day where they can do what they want with their time. However, if you want to achieve more, if you want to get more done, you need to learn to build a structured, organized day that works for you. You have to get very clear on what you want to achieve on a daily and weekly basis and create a system for that. If you don't, you're always going to be inconsistent. All right, you'll have days where you feel motivated and things go great. You might have even weeks and months where things go really well, but then you'll fall off. All right, if you haven't got a reliable system to fall back on, almost always you'll be inconsistent over the long term. So I'm now going to give you a 5-step system that you can implement right away and follow to get more structure and more out of your days. Step 1 is to decide on the highest leverage activities for the week ahead. All right, for most pro players, like I said, this is grinding, this is studying, this is maybe self-development, working on your health, working on your mindset, and all your kind of lifestyle habits around that. All right, but generally it's maybe 3 to 5 things for most players. All right, so for the week ahead, decide what are the highest value activities. All right, be very specific. How many hours of grinding for the week? How many hours of studying? How many hours on the other important activities? Ideally, this will be done on a Sunday or a Monday. All right, and you plan it for the week ahead. Step 2 is to schedule in specific time blocks for each of these activities. All right, what time will you start it and what time will you finish? All right, you don't need to 100% be structured, like 100% start at the right time, 100% finish to the minute time, but it's really important in the planning phase to map out exact time blocks. Exact time blocks will you do that activity. All right, like I said, the areas of your life you're consistent with, most likely you already have these time blocks. You haven't wrote them down, but you're just consistent with them. The things you're not consistent with, you haven't protected them. All right, and we have such busy lives, so many things come up that we need to protect time slots for the most important activities. All right, so decide what days, what time you'll start it, and what time you'll finish. All right, so say for example, you want to do 7 hours of studying over the course of the week, and one of those days is an off day. You will then decide, okay, I've got 7 one-hour blocks of studying I want to do. I'm going to do 2 of those on a Monday. One will be at 2 p.m. till 3 p.m. and one's 5 p.m. till 6 p.m. You get very specific. What day, what time, and for how long. So important, all right? And honestly, but just that one step alone will change so much of how much you're able to get out of your days and weeks, all right? But plan it out over the course of a week. Step 3 is to revisit your schedule and get clear on what is needed for the day ahead. All right, so say you've got your week plan and you've structured all the big activities, then each day you need to check in with that. This can be done in the evening. You can check in the day going forward, or you can do what I do, and each morning look at your schedule for the day and get very clear on what are the highest value tasks that you need to execute on and where you need to be at which times. What am I doing at which times? Which are the high leverage activities? All right, so you've got this kind of zoomed out week, and then each day you're checking in on the daily basis of what needs to be done. Step 4 is to reflect on your performance at the end of each day. You want to know what got done, what didn't get done, and where you can improve. All right, it's really important to have this kind of self-monitoring reflection each day so that you know this is what I planned to do today, but this is what happened in reality. Sometimes an obstacle comes up which wasn't foreseen, maybe a friend comes around when you're meant to study, maybe a family meeting comes, or maybe you just got distracted on social media. Certain times you waste time which you didn't plan on, but when you reflect on that at the end of the day, you can then make plans to change it, to going forward, right? New structures, new routines, or just accept things didn't get done and I need to do it tomorrow. Let's say you planned a study session at 2 o'clock and you didn't get it done, and instead of missing that study session, you now want to move it to the next day. By reflecting on that, you can go, right, didn't get my studying done, but tomorrow I want to move that across to the next day. Which brings us nicely to step 5, which is to make any changes and improvements to the following day's agenda. All right, so you would go into, as you're going through your days, the weeks are zoomed out, but each day you want to build in some flexibility. You want the opportunity to change things for the day ahead. All right, so as say you plan your week, on Friday might be 5 days away, you might not have a full overview of what you want to do on that Friday, but you've got a rough idea when you do your week plan. After Thursday evening, and some things have came up for the week, now for Friday, you might want to move some extra things into Friday. You might want to take some things out. A lunch with a friend might have appeared on the agenda. Some other things might have came onto your list of things to do. All right, so each day you want to build in this ability to check your schedule for the day ahead and make any changes and improvements for the next 24-hour block. All right, and that's it. If you followed these 5 steps consistently, you'd be amazed at how much more you got out of each and every day. You honestly would be like a different version of yourself 6 months in the future, and you'd be so much further ahead than where you currently are. All right, so take action on these, write these 5 points down, and implement them right away. All right, now once you've solved the planner problem, you then have a new problem that arises. All right, and this is called the execution problem. Now, most poker players think they have an execution problem when in reality, they have a planning problem. And once they solve the planning problem with the 5 steps I've just given you, a lot of their execution problems go away. However, there's still some major execution problems that players run into. All right, so let's imagine that you've planned out your perfect week. You've got a really nice schedule, all the key activities are protected, time blocked, and you're really motivated for the week ahead. Let's say on Tuesday, you have it down that you want to do a study session. And the studying is blind versus blind strategies. And you want to go deep into overall strategies for those spots. However, when you sit down to study, you feel a bit distracted. And you end up doing a lower value task. Maybe you look at some hand histories, maybe you watch some poker content on YouTube, and you don't get the session done that you wanted to. You had a really good plan, the idea was good, but the execution was missing. And although you got some studying done, you could argue that you got some studying, you know deep down, you didn't do the hard stuff and the stuff that you planned that's going to be really beneficial to your game going forward. So what went wrong? Did you lack discipline? Did you lack willpower? Did you lack motivation? Or was there something else that came up? Well, to solve this problem, we first need to understand a little bit about how the brain works. So when we want to do a task, the brain is always calculating how much energy it's going to expend to do that activity. If it feels like the expenditure is going to be too high, if the challenge is too big or the task is too challenging, it will instantly try to deviate to an easier option. All right, this will be when you sit down to do a hard study session, the mind will go, do we need some food first? Can we check some hand histories? And should we scroll social media? And you'll see yourself sitting down to do something difficult and going towards something easier. All right, this is a functionality of the brain where it does not want to waste resources on things that are not super important. All right, you need to understand that every time you go to do something difficult, the brain's making a calculation in the background. Is it worth it? Should I do this? Why should I expend energy on this task and this activity? Now, we can't change this functionality of the brain, but we can do 2 key things to fight back. The first thing is to remind ourselves of why we're doing this activity and why it's important towards reaching our goals. All right, one of the mistakes a lot of us make, and I used to make this mistake myself, is we set up our days as a big to-do list. I need to do this. I need to get this done. And everything's this kind of pressured, stressful thing that needs to get done in order to move us forward. All right, this creates a lot of stress, a lot of tension, but also it doesn't motivate us and it doesn't engage us in what we're doing. One of the big shifts I had probably 3 or 4 years ago is when I started to look at my days, instead of the things that I have to do, I started to think about my activities and the things I get to do. All right, it's a small switch in terms of how it looks, but it's huge in terms of how it functions in your brain. All right, so imagine I have to do a study session. I have to sit down and look at solvers. Anytime we're forced to do something, it feels heavy. It feels pressure. It feels like a task in a to-do list. However, if we look at the same activity and we remind ourselves of how important this is, how it's going to move us towards our goals, how you get the opportunity to sit and study poker for a full hour. You're not working in McDonald's or some crappy job. You're a poker player. And you get to study interesting strategies on a daily basis. Wow. Amazing, right? And you get to do that. You don't have to. You can decide to cross that off your list anytime you want, but you get the opportunity to do that if you want to. All right? And once you start to switch everything you're doing with a I get to mindset rather than I have to mindset, and you feel it's important towards your goals, it unlocks a lot of doors and motivation becomes a lot easier. The second thing you need to do is to break down the activity into smaller sections and have a very specific and easy starting point. Let's go back to the study example of studying a blind versus blind strategies. Now, from the mind's perspective, this is daunting. It's very energy consuming. It's almost infinitely complex to solve the whole strategy. And just from a subconscious program, the mind's like, where do I begin? Too much energy to get started. All right, so let's say instead of being very broad, let's say we're very specific. And we said instead of working on a full blind versus blind strategy, we're going to work on the big blind defend range against an aggressive opponent. All right, and then to get started, we're going to run 3 or 4 sims on this exact spot, which gives us a bit of a reference point. And I'm going to have 5 marked hands that I played yesterday from this exact spot that I played. All right, so you've got a specific starting point, you've got Sims already ran, and you know exactly what you need to do. How much easier would that study session be to get started? Especially if you've already pre-ran the Sims. Pretty easy, right? You know exactly what to do, you've got the marked hands, you've got the Sims already ran. Getting started would be so much easier. All right, so we need to, every time we're having an obstacle of getting something done, ask yourself the question, how can I make it easy to get started? Now, a beautiful thing happens once we do get started. Often, motivation kicks in. All right, there's a great book called The Motivation Myth. I'll summarize it so you guys don't need to read it. Basically, the whole point of the whole kind of philosophy is when we start an activity, the motivation comes after. And often we'll sit in front of our computers waiting for motivation to study. But if you just get started, if you make it easy to get started, then the motivation comes 5 or 10 minutes into the activity. So for all the important activities that you want to get done, follow these 2 steps. Step 1, sell yourself on why it's important. You sometimes need to resell yourself on a daily basis, but you need to remind yourself, why is this important and why should my brain care about expending resources on this exact activity? And number 2, break the activity down into something very specific and have a very easy starting point. Don't overcomplicate it and make it as simple and easy as possible to get started. So for example, when I go to the gym, I generally go for 90 minutes to 2 hours, and some days that feels very daunting. However, I've realized all I really need to do is put on my gym clothes and get to the gym. That's a lot easier than doing a full workout. So I keep my mind on the very specific next short-term block. I'm also currently writing the Poker Athlete book, and again, writing a book, very daunting. However, I know exactly what section I need to work on. I have two pages as my minimum amount to write, and I know what I need to be doing to finish that section. All right, so I've got a very specific plan and a very easy way to get started. When you break things down into bite-sized parts, almost anything becomes easy. So if you have a planner problem, work on the 5 steps I give you to get more organized. And if you have an execution problem, work on these 2 steps in order to get moving in the right direction. All right, guys, that's all for today. I hope to see you in the next video.